Welcome to the Son of Awesome Abstracts webinar. This year, we decided to name it Son of since we have run this webinar several times. This year, we went through and did some updates on it, kind of refreshed the information and decided to play with the name a little bit and make it a fun thing. I will be your host today. I'm Susan Kennedy, and our topic is how to create an awesome abstract. The webinar is designed to take some of the mystery out of oh my gosh. Out of how to create an abstract. And we have some other speakers here today who will be joining me. Let's move on into this. I'll be the lead presenter, Susan Kennedy. I'm president of the PMI Dallas chapter, which is a 4,000 member organization of professional project managers in the Dallas area. We are one of the largest PMI chapters in the world. In addition to that, I also am an independent project management consultant, and I do projects all around. I also teach. I am one of the instructors who teaches the PMP exam prep course for UT Dallas and have been doing that for a couple of years. Let me turn it next to David. David, would you please unmute and introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Susan. My name is David Pelz. I'm the managing editor of PM World Journal. We're one of the co-sponsors of the annual UTD Symposium. I'm also one of the abstract evaluators, so I am excited to see abstracts from all of you this year. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and Kurt, give us your intro and unmute.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you, Susan. My name is Kurt Raschke. I'm a product development project manager. I execute innovative product development and business improvement projects for the high technology companies in the Dallas area. I've got my own business, which I call Product Focused Project Management, and as it says, the idea is to help companies focus on exactly what is the product they're trying to create. That's me.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. And Renee, tell us about yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Renee LaBelle. I've been involved in the symposium since the very beginning as a presenter and organizer, and I love it. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Okay, let's move on. We are coming up on the 11th annual Project Management Symposium held at UT Dallas. That's 11 years of leading edge sessions with top keynote speakers and track speakers. This is a non-commercial event put on by thought leaders and practitioners here in the Dallas area and beyond. We have had people internationally fly in for this event, and certainly the keynote speakers often are flying in from somewhere else around the world. There on your screen you see a picture of the most recent event. This is, I believe, Jim Joyner there at the podium, and we have grown over the years. The first symposium, the attendance, I believe, was below 100, and this year I think we're expecting pushing 500, so it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and better every single year, and we are so delighted to be part of it again. I also, as I was speaking with one of the attendees on this webinar earlier, Rebecca, I also have been at almost all of these symposiums, starting with the very first one. It's been so neat to see how the symposium has grown and continued to improve every year. Deadlines for this year's symposium that we're coming up on. The first one is Monday, March 13th. This is when the applications, the abstracts are due. And in addition to the abstracts, we also need information about you, the speaker information, the bio, and the headshots. Those will be reviewed over about a 2-week period, and then on Friday, April 7th, the speakers and the paper selections will be announced. So if you are one of those people who is submitting an abstract, then you'll have it in by the 13th. We'll do the review on it, and then by the 17th, we will, by April 7th, we'll be announcing who has been selected to speak. We always have more submissions than we have slots for, which allows us to make sure that just the very best get in. However, because we have so many submissions, there are excellent sessions that also just don't quite make it. But those will all be announced, and if you are a submitter, you will receive an email by then. Then in July is when the paper, the research paper on your topic, will be due, and your PowerPoint slides that will accompany it for your presentation. And then our symposium this year will be held August 17th to the 18th, plus this year we've added something, a little half-day session on Saturday the 19th. That you'll be hearing more about shortly. We're still in the process of putting that agenda together, and we'll be making more information available on it later. The symposium event is held at UT Dallas at the Richardson campus, same general place it's been for the last several years. Let's talk a little bit about the rules for the abstract submission, because that's what we're focused on today. The abstracts, we request that they be about 250 words or less, which is about half of a page worth of typed printing. They need to include learning outcomes that you intend for your participants, the attendees, to be able to walk out of your room knowing something different or understanding something. And those learning outcomes should be specific, observable, measurable. We have more information on that later on in this session. Your session also, you need to identify which part of the PMI talent triangle it relates to, and we'll get into that in just a minute. There should be no sales content. We have been pretty strict on this point throughout the entire life of this event. So this is not a sales presentation. If you have a product or a service that you're looking to sell, then this is not the time to do it. This is the time to share knowledge and help improve project management and project management practitioners' information. Also, the information that you intend to present should not be previously published. This should be new information. This is part of what keeps this conference so entertaining and fresh and different and exciting, and part of what brings people back year after year after year. Another point about when you're getting ready to submit your abstract, you should make sure that the title of the abstract and the content match, that you have a title that that effectively reflects what it is that you're going to be talking about. A little bit more detail on that PMI talent triangle. The Project Management Institute announced this talent triangle classification of different types of trainings that are available 2 or 3 years back. And all of our presentations need to be identified as to which part of the talent triangle they are hitting in. So there are 3 major classifications. The first 2 are on this slide, the next one's on the next slide. Starting with technical project management. If your abstract or your presentation is going to be talking about topics related to advanced project management, like techniques to improve your work breakdown structure, or how to better gather requirements, or risk management in your portfolio, things like that are listed as examples of technical project management. They don't mean technical in terms of IT. It's technical in terms of the nuts and bolts of how you manage projects. The next topic is leadership, and those would be topics related to leadership skills like negotiation and communications and motivating people and resolving conflicts. Those kinds of things would fall into the leadership topic. And then the third topic is strategic and business management. And this has to do with things related to industry knowledge or business acumen, customer strategy alignment, making sure that, you know, how to align your project with your customers or strategic alignments, maybe things related to finance or marketing. So once you have created your abstract and thought about your 1-hour presentation that you will be giving at the UTD Symposium, you need to also think in terms of what categories of these 3 PMI categories does your content fall under, and identify those for us. Because there are 3, you could have a presentation that touches on all 3. Most likely you're going to be focusing mainly in one or another area of this, but if you do cross multiple areas, we ask that you please make sure that when you submit your abstract, you identify those PDU increments at lowest level 0.25 of a PDU. Last year, we had several abstracts submitted where they indicated that in the PMI talent triangle, it was, say, 42% business, strategic, and 68% technical. We cannot submit that to PMI in that way. It needs to be a clear, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, or 1.0 PDU increments in the talent triangle area. And if you have any questions about that, just contact the UTD PM Symposium office that you'll see on our last slide. Let's get into talking about what is an abstract, because an abstract is basically just a brief summary of a research paper, and it's what you're going to submit in order for the reviewing committee to determine if there is sufficient interest and if this is a topic that would be of practical use to our PM practitioners. But what makes it awesome, what makes an abstract really stand out, for one thing, maybe something a little bit unexpected, because as project managers, and most of our people who attend the symposium are project managers, and most of them have a good bit of experience. They have already read and studied and been to many symposiums, many PMI trainings, or project management education events. You want something that's going to be a little bit different, something with some broad appeal to project managers. It needs to be relevant and directly relatable to those kinds of topics, and helpful, something that would actually help other project managers, or that would have helped you when you were in a position of needing this information. And maybe something that kind of captures the imagination, something a little bit different. We're going to talk about 4 easy steps to get ready to submit this abstract. First, there's some prep work that you're going to do to get ready. Then you'll spend some time thinking about and selecting your topic, writing the draft of the abstract, and then submitting it. This gets you from this point today, if you haven't already started on writing an abstract, all the way through to that deadline of oops, already forgot the deadline, but the deadline in March of submitting that abstract. I think it's the 17th. First step in getting ready, go out to the pmsymposium.utdallas.edu site and take a look there. This is where you'll find information on, first of all, the deadlines. There we are. And then the other dates that are important. You'll also be able to download the call for papers, which is the call for abstracts, basically. And on that link there that you'll see, that will take you to a downloadable Word document that you then take and fill out and complete with your information. This year's theme, Disruptive Leadership in a Global Economy. So some suggested topics around that whole leadership global economy stuff is things like case studies or lessons learned. A lot of our project management practitioners really enjoy hearing what you learned from a project that you did, or a case study that takes a look at the project kind of from start to middle to finish, or whatever stage you're in. The project does not have to be completed before you begin studying what's been going on up to this point, or documenting some lessons learned from it. You could also look at change management or some innovative approaches to leadership in the global economy. Perhaps something on crisis project management. The crises that sometimes initiate a project, or a project that gets into hot water once it's begun, and how it gets out of the hot water are topics that are also of a lot of interest to project managers. And then portfolio management and governance. As we continue to see more companies evolve their project management offices and take more of a holistic view of their management of all of their projects, we're seeing more interest in topics related to portfolio management and governance. I'm going to take just a second here and ask Kurt to unmute and explain to us the right half of some of these topics. And I'm going to also ask anyone who has not muted their phone, who is not speaking, please mute your phone now. We're getting a little bit of feedback. I'll mute while Kurt's talking.
Okay, thanks, Susan. The theme of our conference this year was disruptive leadership in the global economy. And disruptive, you hear a lot about that. You hear about disruptive technologies. You hear about disruptive processes. You hear about disruptive markets. What's generally not recognized is that this goes down to the project management, that you can't manage projects going into this disruptive environment in the same way as you did before. But just the fact that things are changing doesn't mean it's bad. It means it's an opportunity. So we'd be welcome to have papers on the opportunities in this disruptive environment for project managers. You have to change the way you do things for the different types of projects. So what kind of can you learn from entrepreneurship? What kind of entrepreneurial management techniques can you use to bring to project management? The business processes have to change to meet these new requirements. How do you do that? What's necessary? The PMOs can no longer be just checking the box to make sure that the processes have been followed. They have to actually create business value for the corporation. And how do you do that? Everybody says they want to minimize complexity and maximizing value. You know, that's one of those motherhood and apple pie statements. But how do you do that? What are the ways you've learned to do that? Agile versus waterfall. You know, this should not be a us versus them sort of thing. It should be what techniques and can we use from these two different techniques to manage our project. And of course, team collaboration. That's even more important in this environment. So that's just kind of some thoughts about, hopefully, to get you thinking about coming up with some abstracts to talk about disruptive leadership.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for that, Kurt. Once again, I'm going to ask anyone who's not speaking to please mute your phone or your laptop. Thank you. So, to get inspired, take a look at some previous symposiums. There is a tab at the UT Dallas website for this that has a link to previous symposiums, and you can download papers, speaker papers, and slides from previous symposiums. There are also videos out there from the speakers, the keynote speakers from last year's symposium that you can take a look at for inspiration. We always have awesome keynote speakers. When you're getting ready, then next step is to think about selecting your topic. You want to consider the theme of this year, the disruptive leadership and global economy, and some of those specific topics that Kurt and I just discussed. See if you find something that matches within those. Then think about your unique experience, where you've been, what you've done, things that might apply here, something that's kind of different, challenging, something that stands out in your mind. Or some tools and templates that you may have created, something that you've done differently or improved on that you started with that someone else had put out there that is working really well for you. So start thinking about what you want to talk about. Do you have some kind of experience that could help others? If you know how to manage a complex portfolio of projects, or if your company was really struggling with how to do something, allocate resources, or handle schedules with multiple projects, or whatever it is that you've got experience of that could be helpful to other project managers, or that you would want to make sure you take into your next project. Those are the kinds of things that we might be looking for that others might find interesting at the UTD Symposium. You're involved in something that was particularly different or particularly challenging. For project managers who have been around for a while, we usually do have some projects under our belt that were particularly challenging or unique. I was once involved in a project that had to do with replacing financial systems on cruise ships. And so my project team was deployed around the world on cruise ships. And they all said what a horrible project that was. They toured many wonderful spots, but that was different, and the whole organization was interested in hearing, you know, how did you do that project on the cruise ship, and what were some of the challenges? So think in terms of what's what's a little bit different, maybe a little bit colorful, something that would really stick in other people's minds? Or have you created some tools or some templates that would be really helpful, something perhaps on prioritizing projects or helping management through understanding better how to do their role in the whole project management cycle, things like that. If you've got something that's helpful, as I said earlier, something that you would want to make sure you take with you to your next project, that's the kind of tool or template that other people would probably be interested in. And keep in mind, something about this tool or template does not have to be the entire 1-hour presentation, but it could be a component of it. Think about what grabs your attention. So if it stands out to you, it's probably going to stand out to the rest of the project management community also. So things that really make you start thinking. Those are the types of topics that we're looking for. Something unusual, different, fun. All right, now we're up to step 3, where you're actually going to sit down and write a draft. So you've thought about it, you've thought about the topics, you've kind of looked at some of the previous presentations, some of the previous papers, and gotten an idea of the structure of those, and then thought about what it is that you could contribute. Maybe you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 topics. Get focused on one that you're going to want to really speak about. What I have done in the past when I was a speaker at this symposium was I would think about and maybe write down, brainstorm a list of 5, 6, 7, 8 topics, and then I'd narrow it down. And usually I'd find myself at the point where I had 2 or 3 that I really thought would be interesting to other people, and I had a hard time picking one. And so just walk away from it, sleep on it, come back, and there would be one that I really didn't want to give up, and that would be the topic that I would pick to speak on. In the past, we have also seen people submit a couple of different topics, and then whichever one makes it through, that's the one that they're, of course, happy to speak about. So it is acceptable to submit more than one abstract if you want to do that. When you begin to write your draft of the abstract, I'm going to give you a formula. And that's kind of a traditional storytelling formula where you set up a challenge and then you talk about a solution to that challenge and then finish it out with what the result was of the challenge. So recently I was doing some research on how to best get management attention, and I came on this quote that said, "Tell the story." And it was talking about, in our information saturated age, business leaders are not heard unless they're telling stories. And it was talking about how we're inundated. There is so much information coming at us all the time that it's very difficult to get your point across and to make your point remembered without just telling it in a story. And how much easier that is for executives to relate to, and management, and just people in general. Another point that they made is that the facts and figures don't stick so much, but stories and visuals do, and I'll make a caveat on that. Facts and figures stick if you limit the facts and figures to a very small number, like 1 or 2, and they're very high impact and memorable type statistics. But a long laundry list of a whole lot of statistics, that doesn't usually last in people's minds when they walk out. But stories and visuals really do. So think about that as you're beginning to craft your abstract. You also need to really consider the audience, because we have so many people in this particular audience at the UTD-PM Symposium who have been coming multiple years. These are people who are experienced project managers. Many of them have their project management professional designation or another certification. They're Agile or Scrum Master or things like that. They're generally pretty experienced in project management, although we also have some attendees. There is a certain portion who are new to project management or maybe just earned a certification and are looking to pick up their training credits. A lot of them have international experience, either actually working internationally or managing international teams or interacting with international components. So we've got a multicultural, diverse audience that's generally very experienced. So tend to aim your content towards the sophisticated project manager who is well past the basics. Now, at the start, in a half-page abstract submission, you've basically got room for about 3 paragraphs. And so this formula that I'm going to give you, kind of formula structure, is something that you can do in a 3-paragraph summary. So start off talking about the challenge. What was the problem that you're addressing? What was the problem that caused a project to be initiated, or that caused you to need to create a template, or that caused something to happen? Or was there an opportunity? Was there a new business potential out there that your company was interested in that you really wanted to grab hold of? But basically, you were thinking in terms of why. Why did something need to change? Why did this project need to get started? Why did you need to do something at all? Projects are usually started because of some kind of a catalyst. So what was it? Or what was the reason for you going deeper into one particular area and figuring things out? So start with the challenge, and I'll give you some suggestions for starters. Something to set the stage, like the stakeholders were getting restless and we had to do something differently. Kind of something along the "it was dark and stormy night," but don't actually use that. The point is, there's some impending doom, impending opportunity, opportunities passing you by. We absolutely had to. So set us up with what was going on, what was happening that was starting to push you towards something, and build a little bit of tension. Maybe, one more failure and the PMO would be disbanded, or the business would close if we couldn't find a way to do these things. Please, certainly for the sake of the reviewers, do not start your sentences with "in today's challenging world." We already assume that you are in today's challenging world, so you can just go ahead and cut those words out and jump right to it. Some other ideas, maybe a surprising fact, something like, did you know that so many percent of your stakeholders don't know the name of your project? Or when we polled, we found out that. Or most decision makers spend less than 30 seconds. I'd say it might be even less than that, 15 seconds reviewing a funding request. That there are things that are surprising facts that are interesting. If you have done some research on this and have been surprised at what you found, then it's probably going to be surprising to us also, and might make for a good story starter, something to kind of grab our attention. You can also start by asking a question. Have you ever wondered, or I was thinking, why or how? Where did this problem come from? Or how did our message get so garbled, if you're talking about, how to straighten out communications or things like that. So another way to start, you might ask a question, tell a fact, start setting the stage. Those types of things will tend to grab attention from the very beginning and keep us going. I'm going to back up for 1 second, and I'm going to ask Renee if you could unmute for just a minute. Renee, when we were preparing for this, Renee made a point that I thought was very interesting about when he is reading, he's one of the reviewers, and when he's reading these abstracts, how important that first sentence is. Renee, would you like to chime in here on that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Over the years, I've read many abstracts, and often what happens is if the first sentence is really well put together, I pretty much know what the rest of the abstract's going to be, and it really helps guide the process of deciding whether it's an abstract that is going to lead to a good presentation or not. Thanks.
Yeah, good point, Renee. And I feel the same way. When I read a really great first sentence, I'm hooked, and I want to read the rest of the abstract. So spend some time making sure that your starter, your very first sentence, first couple of sentences, do that they grab our attention and make us want to know more. It doesn't have to be startling, but something interesting, something that's a little bit thought-provoking, perhaps. Those are great ways to start your abstract. Second paragraph could be the solution. So you've set up some kind of a problem, an issue, or an opportunity, and now we're going to go into what needed to be done. What was it that had to happen, that had to change, who was involved, and a little bit about how you did it. not what the outcome was yet, but just what was going on in the solution and in developing the response to the issue that was out there. So in terms of what needed to be done, you would be answering questions like, maybe you're starting out with, we had to find a way to do X, or as we began looking deeper into this issue and analyzing the data, we found this really interesting pattern developing that we weren't expecting. Tell us a little bit about that. Or this was a situation where we absolutely had to get an expert in such and such. So we had to go out and do a search, and our solution was to bring in someone who had this type of experience or could talk to this or things like that. Or just, bringing a certain group of stakeholders or a certain collection of people or interests together would be key, but how do we do it when they're dispersed all over the world or whatever the issue might have been? Those are some types of solutions that you could describe a little bit more. You might also want to talk about who was involved. A lot of times, whenever we do have issues that we're overcoming or an interesting story to tell, it involves people at the top executive level, sometimes at the very top of the company. So something like we needed the top executives to recognize that such and such needed to happen, or that they needed to do something. Or maybe in terms of who was involved, one particular stakeholder, kept driving this one particular point and it stuck with us and we couldn't forget about it. They had a different idea or something like that. I once heard a presentation, it's been probably 15 years ago, where someone talked about how they were in their office and an employee's mother came in and talked to them about a situation that was going on. And I still remember that presentation and the point of it all these years later. So if you have something memorable, draw the picture and talk about the solution in terms that other people can relate to, how you developed the solution. Then for your third paragraph, you can talk about the results. People always want to know the end of the story. So please don't leave us hanging. If you're going to talk about what, why, a problem, an issue, an opportunity, and then how something needed to be done to change and what kind of solution you came up with, then we want to know what happened. Did it work? Did it not work? Did it lead to more problems? Did it solve more problems? What was the outcome? Was it delivered in time? Did you make the deadline? Was something great like income increased or expenses reduced or whatever? Now is the time where you could throw in one of those interesting facts. Again, very small number, limited interesting facts, but something that would really bring home the point and show us that this really made a huge difference in our lives. Something that maybe, was there a surprise in the result? Did something unexpected happen that you weren't prepared for, or that was even better than what you were hoping for? Again, keep it simple. If you're going to use facts and figures, simple, something that we can remember when we walk out of the room, but not too much. Think about, did whatever happened, did the result lead to something else? For example, the templates that we created here were then used across the entire company and were posted on projectmanagement.com and are now used across the world or whatever. Or did you learn something? This is a great time to share the credit for the great things that happened with others. It's okay to share what went wrong. If things didn't go as planned, you can share that too. Unfortunately, this didn't work out as planned, but what we learned was so valuable that we were able to take it into the next project and execute flawlessly the next time or something like that. So it's okay. Everything doesn't have to be a brilliant success. If it has an important message, something that was really great that you learned, that is also of interest to other project managers. But I will say, I'll just add a caveat, because I read an abstract once, and they really focused on what a failure was. And by the time I finished it, I really didn't want to hear more. I was a bit depressed. It was just too much doom and gloom. There still needs to be something helpful at the end of it, and not just, and then at the end I lost my job kind of thing. It's take us beyond that to something that other people could apply a positive thing from. Okay, so you've written your abstract, half a page, maybe about 3 paragraphs. I'm going to ask in particular, if you are submitting an abstract, please break it up a little bit. Do not make that entire half page one long run-on paragraph. It's very difficult to read. We mentally need that break. So give us at least 1 or 2 paragraphs, break it up a little bit, keep it within the size range, and then kind of get ready to tidy it up. So the last step is the tidy it up part. You're going to edit it, finalize it, and submit it. And this is the point where you want to step away from that abstract, walk away from it, let it sit for just a little bit of while, and then come back to it, read it again with your fresh eyes, and ask yourself, what's the point of this? Am I clear in the point that I'm trying to make? Does that come through? And is it interesting? Is it unique? Is it different? Would you, if you were reading this abstract, this little half-page thing, would you want to hear more about this topic? If you want to hear more about it, then we probably want to hear more about it too. You want to check your word counts. When I write abstracts, I have a tendency to just go ahead. I'm wordy. I'll go ahead and let myself write everything I want to write, and then I check my word counts, and I go, oh, great, I've got to cut this in half. And so then I go back and work real hard at cutting out all the non-essential words, cutting out the non-essential information, and getting it boiled down to something that really is high impact. Also, please check your grammar, check your spelling, check your punctuation. These practices need to look professional, even just the abstract does. So if we're seeing, errors come through in the abstract, then we have a tendency as reviewers to think that the final version might not be as polished as what we would like, as what the people who attend this seminar every year are going to expect. Now we're going to talk about the learning objectives. This was something that I mentioned up front, that you're going to need to identify the learning objectives. When PMI came out with their talent triangle, one of the things that they also began insisting on was that for each presentation, we need to have identified what participants will learn in this 1-hour session. So you'll need to list your learning objectives based on the abstract that you wrote, based on the research paper that you plan to write. So some examples of learning objectives would be something like, at the completion of this course, the participants, the attendees, will be able to something, draft a project chart, or create a risk template, create something, or explain the initiation processes, or analyze areas of highest risk in communications, or identify. We're looking for those action verbs of what it is that that the participants will be able to do. What are you teaching them to do? What are you presenting on them that they'll be able to take away from this? Identifying strategies, or contrasting and comparing project management responsibilities to sponsor responsibilities. These are some examples of learning objectives, and you will likely have more than one. I'd say the average that I remember from last year were about 3 or 4 learning objectives for each one of the abstracts, each one of the 1-hour presentations. Some more examples, maybe at completion of, they'll be able to identify 3 ways to create value through portfolio prioritization, or identify key answers to questions, or key questions to ask or to answer when recommending, make versus buy, or discuss recent trends in agile project planning, or identify these X number of competencies for leading global teams. Things like that. Those would be examples of learning objectives. Of course, take these and reword, but the idea is they need to be actionable verbs, and they need to be specific, and they absolutely need to tie to your abstract. So make sure that whatever you're giving us as your learning objectives, we can see how someone who is attending this abstract written session would be able to get that from your objectives. And I think, I'm going to ask Kurt or Renee to chime in here. When we were going through this a couple of days ago, one of you was making a point about this and how important it is for the learnings to tie to the abstract.
Yeah, that was me. And
thanks.
This Kurt, the learning has to be clear. the learning objective, because let's face it, there's really a fairly small number of objectives you want out of a project. So whatever you put down for the learning objectives, it's got to be clear how you got that. You can't say, here's the problem, listen to my presentation, and here's what you're going to get out of it. It's got to be something in between.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kurt. Okay, so continuing on, finishing up. Okay, so you've written your abstract, you've done your learning objectives, and also your division of how it relates to the PDU classifications. Finish up, update your bio. You probably have some more experience since the last time that you did a bio, and a photo. And then make one last review. This is a great time to have somebody else take a look at your abstract and read it. It's only half a page. It's not going to take somebody much time to read it, but a final review from somebody else will help maybe give you some more ideas or suggestions, or let you see how other people are going to view this. It's great if you can have someone who is not a project manager review it. If they can understand the point that you're trying to get across, then it is probably in submission ready form. Then go ahead and hit the submit, and you are all done. You've crossed that finish line, except for, if this abstract is selected, the whole writing of the research paper and presenting the paper at the event. So yay, you made it. Let's talk a little bit about what the selection committee looks for. This is a selection committee from a couple of years ago, and the abstract review process. So how, we're often asked, how are these abstracts reviewed, and what process does it go through once you hit the email send and then you wait? So first off, UTD receives all of the abstracts before they are given to the reviewers, and they scrub them. So they take the author names off so that the people who are on the reviewing committee will not be biased by personal connections with the people who are writing. So if it's someone that we may know or have seen presentations before, we don't know that. That information gets completely taken off before it's sent to the reviewers. The reviewers each, and there are about 5 or 6 reviewers, the reviewers independently read every single one of the abstracts that are submitted and independently rate them. And then those ratings in total are sent to UTD, and UTD compiles them all, adds them up, totals them. The highest rated abstracts are the ones that are selected until all slots are filled. Now, we usually have about 45 available slots for presentations at the UTD Symposium, and we get around 70 to 75 abstracts a year. So not all of them can be not all of them can be selected because we have that limited number of slots. This is also part of the process that makes sure that the abstracts of most interest, the new fresh material, the abstracts that have the highest quality, those are the ones that are selected. I'm going to turn it over now to some of the other reviewers and ask you all just to give us your perspectives on what it is that you're looking for in top papers and some mistakes to avoid. Give us an idea, Renee, also of how many years you have been reviewing these papers. Maybe if you can remember or have some idea about how many papers you think you've reviewed in total. And I'll mute while you speak up.
You caught me off guard because I don't know how many years I've been reviewing abstracts, but it has been several years. I really do enjoy reading the abstracts. I don't generally sit down and read all of them in one day. It's too much, but I really do enjoy reading the abstracts, and we do get a tremendous amount of really good submissions. I mean, that's one of the exciting things about the symposium is to see all the new ideas that are coming out, and I don't know who's submitting, but you know, the ideas that they're generating are always very interesting. So, I mean, what I look for in the abstract papers that are submitted is what I'm trying to do is visualize what is this presentation going to be about? What's the research behind it? And if I can't understand in that short passage what the presentation is going to be like, then I can't give it a very high score. even though I'm pretty sure that the person who wrote the abstract has a pretty good idea of what they want their presentation to be. But all I can do is look at the abstract and make an evaluation on the information being presented to me. This is what they're trying to say. So it's really important. And I mean, Susan, you have stressed this all the way through your presentation. Being short, concise. If I had longer, I could do a better job. But you don't. You've got 250 words, so it's harder to be short and concise. That's the challenge of doing the abstract. And so the mistakes to avoid is basic things like typos and incomplete sentences and run-on sentences. That just sort of distracts and reduces my comprehension ability. And really, if the first couple sentences knock it out of the park, I know that the rest of the abstract is going to be good. That's mistakes to avoid. Just try to be short and concise is the goal, and so don't be ponderous. I actually remember one year that we did get an abstract, and it was several pages long. That was before we put the 250 word limit on it, and it was so unbelievably disorganized as to what's this guy going to talk about? So that's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Renee. I agree. Okay, Kurt, you're up next. Tell us what you're looking for in reviewing the papers.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I want to just, re-emphasize what Renee just said about being concise and clear. One of the things I look for in the paper is what's the relation to the symposium theme. The symposium team every year spends quite a bit of time thinking about, well, what are the themes of the project management audience in the DFW area this year would like to hear about. So people who take the time to come up with an abstract and presentation that relates to the theme goes to the top of my list. And I am very concerned that the theme and the title have to connect. I already talked about having the text connect with the learning objectives, but also with the title. If you have a super title and then the presentation or the abstract is just something that could be presented at any generic project management conference, it's not going to get highly rated. I'm looking for papers that people have thought about, what can I say that's going to be innovative and fresh on this particular theme. I already talked about, I look for how the learning outcomes will actually be implemented by the presenter. And this is where the innovation really comes in. And this is the challenge, is you have to think at a very high level. How can I explain in one or two sentences what the main way that these learnings are going to be implemented and get that across? And then what I'm particularly interested in, what is unique or fresh about that implementation. If it's just a rehash of something that everybody's heard for the past 10 years, it's probably not going to go to the top of my list. And the other thing I would like to say is, remember, this abstract is not just to get you past the reviewer panel. Once you get accepted and you're in the symposium, there's going to be 5 or 6 tracks going on simultaneously. So write your abstract so that you can convince the attendees to come to your presentation, because you're going to be competing with 4 or 5 other people in the same time slot, and you want to get them to come to yours. So that's kind of what I look for.
Yeah, good point. That's great. Thanks, Kurt. All right, let's move on to David. David, will you unmute and tell us what you're looking for in the top papers?
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to reinforce a couple of points that Kurt made. That is, I think one of the most important things I look for is if the topic and the content is going to be of value and of interest to the attendees themselves. So we want the conference to be as valuable and as useful as possible to those who attend. Secondly, and also related to the theme, so one of the real important aspects of this conference every year is to try to make it as useful and relevant to local industries and organizations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I would like to see papers that are addressing issues within a particular industry or type of project or something that makes it really relevant to not only the attendees but their employers. I think that can help both draw more interest and make it more useful. And finally, I'm really looking for papers and abstracts that advance the project management professional body of knowledge a little bit. So we don't necessarily need to see regurgitation of stuff from the PMBOK guide or other publications or old topics. We'd like to see some new aspects, and frequently this comes from personal perspectives and personal experience. So I'd really like to see more of those stories and case studies and topics that Susan really emphasized during this abstract seminar. And then finally, it needs to be really well written and using good grammar. So do your spell checks and make sure you're paying attention to some of the simple things. Also, when I look at abstracts, I'm coming from two perspectives. One, I'm part of the abstract review team trying to select the best papers. But after the conference, we actually republished some of those papers in the PM World Journal. So I'm also looking at papers that have a broader interest out in the rest of the world. And in that regard, when it comes time to get the paper done, and I know that's not necessarily the subject of this webinar, but papers that have references and footnotes, that are really professionally written, are important. That is, don't use quotes from somebody that you don't acknowledge, or make sure that you footnote or reference any information you get from other sources. That's really important. So I think that's about it. Good luck with your abstract presentation, and I hope to see you in August.
Great. Thanks, David. And then for myself, when I'm reviewing papers, what I'm looking for is something different, interesting, a topic that I really want to know more about. If I find myself, as I'm reading all of these abstract submissions that come through, if I'm reading one and my brain goes off and starts thinking of, oh, this is interesting, how might I apply that in the next project that I'm about to do, and I'm already thinking, oh, this is something I could really use, those are the types of papers that I'm going to be drawn to, because if it's of interest to me, it's probably going to also be of interest to other project managers in a broad form. I want something that looks like it's going to be not just of value, but also maybe a little bit entertaining. Remember, have mercy on the other attendees. This is a full long 2 days of session after session after session. So you want to make sure that what you're presenting is going to capture imagination and hold attention, and be the kind of session that people are really wanting to hear and would really enjoy sitting through, so that at the end of the hour they think, wow, that time went by so fast, I can't believe it. And kind of referring back a little bit to what David was saying, I'm looking at this from two perspectives, but my second perspective is not the publishing of the papers afterwards. I'm looking at it from the perspective of, I'm also going to be an attendee. And so is this a session that would pull me in, that I want to make sure that I attend? So I'm looking for things that just are a little bit different, of broad interest and appeal, and something that would be helpful to others. Mistakes to avoid: make sure you do the grammar check. Make sure that you break the paper up a little bit. The run-on sentences that go on forever are very hard for reviewers who are reviewing 70 or 80 papers to get through. So, keep it to the point and succinct, interesting. Show us, the thing that makes this topic so interesting to you. The reviewing and scoring process, here are kind of a summary of the things that we talked about. Each one of us, we look for relevance to our audience. interesting, well-defined, original material, practical application, something that they could walk out of your session and walk back into work and begin applying right away. Something that's timely, of interest, and just the overall level and quality of it and the completeness. So we're looking for something that looks like it's going to go ahead and have all of the elements in it when it's finished. Frequently asked questions that we get: why are some papers not selected? You probably heard a lot of that. Maybe they're not project or project manager oriented. We've actually seen submissions. I've seen some come through that I was left wondering, how does this relate to project management? I couldn't get it. Or if the level is too basic. Remember, our audience is kind of sophisticated, so most of them are beyond the project management 101 level. They're looking for something a little bit more helpful once you've had some experience. Again, caveat, there are a certain number of early project managers who attend this, but the majority of the audience is pretty seasoned. No content rehash. If we've heard it before, we don't want to necessarily hear it again. Poorly written grammar, if it's not clear what your purpose is, if it's dry and boring and hard to get through in a half-page abstract, that's the impression that we're going to have about the presentation and the whole paper. Anything that has a sales pitch in it, we're going to go ahead and cut out right away. And reuse of someone else's work without giving proper acknowledgement, as David Pelz was saying. We're often asked, is preference given to past presenters? And in a word, no. First off, topics need to be fresh. New presenters are strongly encouraged to submit, but we don't know who you are. So the author's name is removed before it's sent to the reviewing committee. Papers are selected based on the grades in the reviews. So we don't give you bonus points for having presented before. Your presentation, your abstract needs to stand on its own merits. For more information, you can do just any kind of an internet search on UTD PM Symposium, and you should get the link. You can email to pmsymposium@utdallas.edu or call Kathy Lovelace at the number given there, or there is the actual website there, pmsymposium.utdallas.edu. Right? And when you're finished with this webinar itself qualifies for one leadership PDU. That'll be a self-reported. We don't file the PDUs for you from this webinar, but if you attended the entire session, go ahead and file your own leadership PDU on this. You can give the abstract, awesome abstract's name in the title, and that it was put on by PMI Dallas chapter and UTD. A link to the recorded webinar is going to be available within a few days. And we are right at the end of our time. I'm going to look over at the chat questions now real quick and see if any questions have gone unanswered. Let's see. Questions about downloading the presentation. That presentation will be made available. Wei, are you still on, our technical person, Wei? If you're still on, can you speak to that? Okay. We're going to assume Wei may not still be on. And Wei had told me earlier that he will be making the slides available. Of course, they're available through this, through the link that you'll receive since you registered for this event. You will be receiving that link. So that should take care of that. Okay, with that, we are right at the end of our time. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. If you have any other questions, you can go ahead and send them into the UTD email link that I showed earlier, or contact me directly, president@pmidallas.org. Thank you so much for your time.